much of a change anywhere. Um, I have a little paper here, the struggle going on in Maine because Maine interfered with the practice of medicine. They have the highest overdose deaths in the nation, which nobody ever looks at those figures. They just say it, and everybody runs screaming, "Stop the dope fiends," without checking. There was an HBO special that started to look into the overcorrections. They always talk about overprescribing. How about overcorrections? Doctors in Maine are scared, running afraid about reprisals from the state. One desperate amputee. Are you ready? How many doctors did he call before he found one who would treat him? 57. There's not going to be any doctors in the United States left to treat people with rare painful diseases. And that's because legislators are playing doctor. And when you play doctor, you write things down and you say, okay, here's how we're going to do it. That's not the way it works in medicine. And more importantly, this thing about safe prescribing, I don't know what safe prescribing is. When I give medicines to people, I do it in a safe manner, which is adhering to dosage limits if there are any, or in the case of insulin and pain medicine, going up slowly, looking up side effects and discussing them with the patients. They're struggling with palliative care. They still don't get it. I wrote a little article, not that everybody has to read it, but palliative care is real simple. You got a rare painful disease. You can't treat it. You can't cure it. So what do all doctors do for the past 5,000 years? They take care of the pain. And we've had pain medicine since Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. And you know what? It works. I read an article the other day that says, oh, well, maybe these pain medicines do work, but just a little bit. So I did a Twitter poll and I said, okay, how many of you feel your pain medicines have worked a little bit, medium, or a lot? 10% said they worked a little bit and 85% said they worked great. So, they do these studies and they publish them and they're all biased because, why are they biased? They're biased because people are afraid of becoming addicted. It's a fear of addiction phobia. And we keep going over and over this, but this main problem, they're struggling up there. They keep passing all these laws, and finally the doctors up there said, we've had it. We're not prescribing at all. Forget it. They keep hanging on this 100 milligram limit, which is only enough oxycodone to treat an 8-year-old. But when people are afraid there's a hurricane coming, get down there and get some bread and milk. Of course, bread and milk's the worst thing to store up when a hurricane's coming. You need Spam and canned soup and stuff, but no, get that bread and milk. And that's what people do when they're panicked. So people are panicked in the United States about being possessed by the devil in the form of opiate pain medicine. And how do they get afraid of something that only occurs in 2 or 3 people per 1,000? Because they're told to be afraid, and because news reporters do not ask questions like, where did this 100 milligram thing come from? The FDA says you can treat with opiate pain medicine to any milligrams you want. You just go slowly and you work up the ladder. I've had patients who've been on 10 milligrams and I've had patients who've been on 100 milligrams. So that's tenfold, and they're both doing fine. So they're messing around with the practice of medicine, and they don't even listen to the real fundamental things like there is no such thing as an upper limit for opiates. Look at the FDA, call them up and talk to them. All these government agencies have phones, and you can call them up and talk to them. But the people in Maine never did that because they just copy from the kid in the next row. What kind of milligram limit do you use? Oh, 100. Okay, that's what I'll put on my paper. We'll just all use this 100 milligram limit. Does everybody know where this originally came from? This came from an organization called Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing, which is really Physicians for Reduction of Opioid Prescribing. This is where it came from. And it went to the FDA in 2012 as a proposed limit, and the FDA said, nonsense, you can't limit these drugs. You haven't presented any information. And here it is, a few months ago, 100 MME right in this paper about the struggles going on in Maine. So what do we need? We need legislators who raise their hand and say, where did you get that number? What is this overprescribing? What do you mean by that? And what are the consequences of overprescribing? Let's say doctors give out opiates to every single patient that comes to the office, no matter what. What's going to happen? And what will happen is one person per 1,000 will have the funny side effect of the pain medicine and become addicted. Now, what do we mean by addicted? They're going to go start living in dumpsters? No. It means when they take an opiate, they go to the moon. They feel so good, they can't stand it. So if doctors say, okay, look, if this happens to you, you get back to the office the next day, you have the addiction gene, you have addiction, one person out of 1,000, and so we're going to treat you. My goodness, that's a new concept. Discover a disease and then treat it. So you can treat addiction, and they'll never go out and buy heroin, and they'll never die. So you could stop all the deaths, but you're not going to stop addiction because it's genetic. But you can manage the disease. People with diabetes, if they didn't get insulin, if they need insulin, would gradually die. They would just wither away and die. But with this disease, you're not going to die. You're going to crave the drug. And there's lots of other diseases you have cravings as well for water and food. It's a biochemical thing. It's a biochemical drive. It's nobody's fault. So we need legislators to raise their hand and ask questions. And if they don't know the answers, they should get hold of some doctors, get hold of some biochemists from the universities. There's 2 of them right here in Raleigh. And say, look, we got some questions here. What's going on with this brain stuff? What's happening? Are these people really bad? Are they really criminals? And that's what people are afraid of. And people who use opiates are not criminals. They steal and manipulate. It's only people who take alcohol, cocaine, and amphetamines who are the real criminals. Because with those 3 drugs, you can go crazy. You can develop a psychosis. With opiates, you don't. So 999 people out of 1,000 will never, ever have an opiate addiction, no matter what they take, no matter if it's 50 times 100 MME. They're not going to addict. Simple facts. Okay, Janelle.
Okay. We also are going to have on Penny Huber for a few moments. She's going to talk to us tonight for a few minutes about the loss of her son, Douglas Huber, that passed away August 30th due to the undertreatment of pain. Penny, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you this evening?
Yes, I'm doing as well as I can, being that I lost Doug.
I'm sure. Can you tell us what exactly happened?
Well, actually, like you mentioned before, we really don't know what happened, but he was unconscious when I found him, and they said that he passed on. And I know that we've been having a problem getting a pain management doctor to prescribe him for his intractable pain as a result of failed back surgery. And like Dr. Kline mentioned, they all lump people into one category. We're all drug addicts. And this has got to stop. I mean, my son was on opiates for like 10 years with his other pain management doctor, and never did he come up dirty, and he was a responsible person taking his meds, and he had a life. He could move. He wasn't acting like he couldn't, like he had, he was like he couldn't move. He couldn't get out of bed half the time, and this was allowing him to lead a somewhat normal life without being in pain. But all that changed when the government stepped in and started to tell all the medical field that they can only give out so much opioids to these people. And it's just, I'm doing this in his memory because I want to carry the torch. I want to try and help people, and I want to get the message out that we have to do something, like you said, with the people in the government. Our representatives, our congressional people. They have to start carrying the torch and start to reverse this, because if they don't, more people will die.
How long did he suffer with his reduced medicine?
Like I said, he was on opiates for 10 years, and the doctor
and then how long off?
that was, and then just about a couple of years ago, he had to change doctors because we moved from North Jersey to South Jersey, and it was really tough down here because they had so many people on heroin and the opioids and whatnot, and they judged everybody that walked in the office if you were looking for a new pain management doctor. And then they looked at the amount that he was on, and they said, "Oh no, we can't do this. We can't give you this. You're going to have to start with the bare minimum." And how can you do that to someone when he has been taking, a higher dose, definitely more than 100 MMEs or whatever they want to go by, the guidelines, and that would put him into, he would go into when you don't have enough in you, you go into that
withdrawal.
state, withdrawal.
And increased pain.
An increased pain.
And his pain, the pain wasn't being addressed at all. I mean, like I said, he needed more than that, because he wasn't craving it. He was tolerant of it. His tolerance had gone up.
He craved relief.
Right, he craved relief.
This
right,
is really
exactly.
This is a good example. The problem is that right now doctors are being arrested and put in prison because somebody comes to the office and takes a prescription out and sells it for a lot of money, and the doctor doesn't know it. Too bad. No, the police say you should have known. You should have known these people are criminals. But when a person dies from negligence on the part of a doctor, that's when it's time to do something. And you can either work through the Board of Registration of Medicine, or you can call the district attorney's office and say, look, he was undertreated on purpose, and the reasons they gave do not hold up. Even the CDC didn't say anything about 100 milligrams treatment for a chronic disease. They only said that when you first start somebody on an opiate, and that's one time, and you have to be careful. There's nothing in there.
Right.
So if the doctor says, oh, the CDC made me do it, you just take a copy of the CDC regulations, all 50 pages, over to the doctor and said, find it. Well, why did you do it then? Somebody told me. Well, doctor, you're a professional. Is that what your excuse is? Is somebody told you? Well, so it's not in the CDC regulations. What is it in? And where is this stuff about high doses cause more problems? The FDA already ruled in 2013 that it's got nothing to do with dose. As a matter of fact, they said as many problems can occur with low doses. So the whole thing is dishonest. And I think people should be held accountable. I'm sorry. I'm no longer a fellow in my medical profession. These people deserve to be punished because they are ignorant.
Right. And I agree. And this doctor wouldn't give him any more than 15 oxycodone milligrams, and he wouldn't give him He wouldn't give him OxyContin, which he had before. He had the two of them. One was the immediate release, and one was,
Right.
the backup. But all he would give him was morphine sulfate and the oxycodone 50 milligram. And Doug had asked him, well, I was taking OxyContin. He says, oh, no, I don't prescribe that. He says, how do I know you're not selling them? Can you imagine
How do you
that?
know he isn't going to go out in the parking lot and steal his car? Yeah, that's really
I know,
horrible.
because
You see, this is the kind of stuff, if they brought the doctor up on the stand, they would say, how come you undertreated him? Isn't undertreatment always negligent? Give me an example, doctor, of when undertreatment is appropriate for any disease. Any disease. And you know what?
right, and then
It never
yeah.
is. Never. So,
And he didn't
you can
give
do what
out.
you want, but go ahead.
Well, I wish I could get someone to back me up as far as legally to get this guy. I mean, it's all said and done. My son is gone now. What
Right.
what do I do now? You know what I mean? I have a memory of this kid, and it's vivid in my brain because I found him dead, and it was horrible.
God.
It really was. It
Now,
really was.
God.
Penny, did you find out what was the cause of his death yet?
No, they didn't give me the results yet.
And they probably won't. He could have just died as a result of untreated pain, which has been recorded, and in which case they're not
Right.
going to find anything. Sadly, these
Right.
medical examiners put down overdose secondary to drugs,
Right.
So hopefully that won't happen, but it's very hard to do anything about it. But, you can call the district attorney. They're usually in each county, and say, what? People have talked to me, and they said, I should at least run this by you. Because it looks to me like this doctor did things he cannot defend. And he can't. You can't find anything anywhere in a medical book or journal that says you're supposed to give tiny amounts of opiates out of fear. Opiates are like insulin. You give as much as you need to. I mean, I've had patients on 20 units of insulin and 200 units. You give it the medicine until it works. And that's what the FDA has always said. And the FDA is in charge of prescription drugs, not the CDC, not the state.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
Just the
You
FDA in Washington.
You want to hear this, doctor? You want to hear this? My son wrote to the CDC, okay, and told them about his depression and his anxiety as a result of not getting his medical needs met, his meds met. You know what they wrote back to him and said, well, maybe you should have a few drinks once in a while for your anxiety.
Oh, my Lord, save that. Save that. Yeah, I don't think it's kind of like doctors need to go back to medical school, and they have a course called PAIN. Because I think doctors have forgotten just how awful it is. It's funny. Today I pulled a tendon in my knee, and every time I took a step, it hurt. And I thought, buck up, kid. This is nothing, But it was really awful, and it lasted for over an hour. Good Lord. I don't think that people understand what it's like to be in severe pain all the time. Lying in bed, I took care of a young person the other day. She had such severe pain, nobody wanted to treat it because they couldn't figure out what it was. She was so sick. Here she was, 18 years old. She couldn't take a shower for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, what would a doctor say to that? What would a doctor say to that? Oh, she's faking? Or she doesn't like showers? I mean, at that point, one of my people who tweets says, you just leap over the desk and dislocate the shoulder of the doctor and then say, try a little Tai Chi. That'll work great. It's really kind of amazing. This is the first time in the history of medicine, I think, that healers, no matter what they are ignoring people in pain, thinking it's somehow going to harm the doctor if they give them medicines, because then the person will turn into a dope fiend and come back and kill the doctor. I mean, this is what's running through people's minds. And in fact, people on heroin and marijuana have the lowest rate of crime. Crime occurs with, as we've mentioned, alcohol, cocaine, and amphetamines, and not. So everything about the drug on wars is wrong. It's wrong, and there's very simple facts to set it right. And so we need to have people become active and say it's genetic. 99.5% of people will never become addicted, ever, 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 even if they took IV heroin. They would never become addicted. This is the myth that goes around. And you know what? The DEA believes they're doing God's work. They really do.
Well, Doug listened to you on your on the web one time. Janelle had that up on the website. Doug listened to you faithfully on that, and he said, "See, Mom, I want you to hear Dr. Kline. I want you to hear what he has to say about addiction and everything. It makes sense." And he was really into you. He really admired you. And he said, "I wish I had a doctor like him here in New Jersey."
It's just so horrible. It's just, it's just difficult to even talk about it. And here you are talking about losing your son. There's nothing worse than a parent losing their child. And my heart goes out to you.
Right.
And
thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi Kushner in Boston wrote a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And he was a rabbi. He was a man of the cloth. And he lost his son at age 12 to some horrible disease. So he said, you got to do something, he said. You got to do something. So what you can do is up to you, but doing something, I think, as you're talking right now, is kind of the responsibility, that we all have to try to fix this. He was murdered, as far as I'm concerned, by the government. And these ignoramuses in the CDC who don't even have the right to say anything, all coming down from the PROP group, which is the Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing. They're the ones behind this. And they infiltrated the CDC. Half the guideline writers were members of PROP. They've got a PROP member at CDC who's the one who announces the epidemic. We looked at the numbers the other day. From year to year, there's an increase of one person per 100,000, which is really teeny, of the overdose deaths every year for the past 12 years. There's no epidemic. It's fake.
It's a fake epidemic. I know that.
It's a fake epidemic. It's not even a real epidemic, but you read in the paper every day that we're fighting the epidemic, fighting the crisis. Nobody ever asks. Nobody ever.
Well, the media.
The
media.
Yeah,
the media throws us under the bus. The media throws us under the bus,
We got into the Vietnam War based on the Gulf of Tonkin, which supposedly somebody, the North Vietnamese, shot up one of our ships. It was a lie. It was a lie, but they voted in the Senate 99-1 to go to war. So they went to war in Vietnam over a lie. And they knew it was a lie. And I'm sorry, I don't generally go around calling people liars, especially not the government, because my daughter works for the government. And she's a nice person and doesn't fib. But every once in a while, you get these fanatics, like in the CDC. The CDC and PROP are responsible, as far as I'm concerned, for the loss of your son and for the loss of many other people that we have on our, Medium website who've lost their lives. Because we've got people that believe that drugs are evil, and they've been believing that over the past 100 years. But guess what? They're wrong. This is the first time in the last 5 drug wars that started with Eisenhower that there's actually been serious consequences. The other drug wars didn't really mess with pain patients too much, but this prop group, after they got everything turned down by the FDA, went down to the CDC and pushed all the things that were denied by the FDA into the CDC guidelines, into an agency that does not have the authority to say anything about prescription drugs. And the biggest lie comes from the CDC talking about overdoses without putting a very important adjective in the front of the word overdose. Heroin overdose.
Right.
All the statistics they have are street heroin addiction. And you read newspaper articles, I read scientific papers, and never once have I seen the word heroin in front of overdoses. So you see the perception they're creating, dishonestly, is that, people are just running around in neighborhoods, living in bushes. And then, of course, you read a couple of horrible stories of kids, on the football team that end up dying from heroin. Well, that's ignorance. That's because the doctor didn't say, look, you ever had an opiate? Well, I'm going to give you some for your fracture. And you call me immediately if you go to the moon with this. Everybody else, the 999 people, just get drowsy or get sick to their stomach or something, but they certainly don't go to the moon. Big perception that everybody gets high on opiates, and that's not true. People that abuse other drugs don't take opiates because they don't get high. You got to have the gene.
Yeah. That's what my son said. He said, "Ma, I don't get high from this. This helps my pain.
Right.
This helps me to walk." You know?
Right.
And he said in Canada, they're giving out the heroin addicts, they're giving out them opioids now because they can function on the opioids. They can go to work.
That's the treatment. Yeah.
Right. That's the treatment. Isn't that ironic?
And people don't talk to addicts. If you talk to them, first of all, you don't know that they have addiction disease because they're being treated and they're fine. They go to work, they have families, they go to the carnival.
Yeah.
It's just ignorance. It's just puritanical, keep it pure ignorance. But now they're responsible for the loss of life. So they need to stand up before all of us and tell us why they were doing this.
Exactly. They need to be made accountable for it.
Exactly. Somebody
really
needs to hold them accountable. I will light a candle for you, and Janelle will give you my email address. And if you need to chat, I'm always available.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Penny,
Thank
so
you
much for coming
me.
on. And I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Janelle. And I'll be talking to you soon, I hope.
Okay, that sounds great. Have a good evening.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
All righty. Well, we also have Jeff Scott on with us here. Jeff, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you doing this evening?
Thank you. I'm obviously feeling a little sad at the moment, hearing about Doug's plight, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with the doctor and learn from him and talk a little bit about my own campaign.
So you are running for, you're a Libertarian candidate running for U.S. Congress in North Carolina in District 9, correct?
That's correct. Excuse me. That's a federal office. It's not a state office.
Okay.
And the election
and where's
it's in the 9th district, which is eight counties. It's part of Mecklenburg, part of Cumberland, but it goes out through. The population's concentrated in Union County, but it goes to Anson, Richmond, Robeson, Bladen, Scotland counties. So you can see it takes the lower third of the state. So the state has 13 congressional districts, and there are 2 special elections, one in the former seat of Congressman Walter Jones, great anti-war Republican. There's a race there featuring Tim Harris, Libertarian candidate. There'll be a vote next Tuesday also. And then there's 4 candidates on the ballot in in the race that I'm in.
Where did you grow up, Sid?
I grew up in Southern California. I was born in, in San Diego County. Yeah. And I lived most of my adult life in the Bay Area, California, and I moved to Charlotte about 9 years ago. California is a lovely place. Great if you're rich, great if you're poor, but kind of sucks if you're middle class, trying to fight the high taxes and real estate value. So with my family, we moved here 9 years ago. My wife and 2 kids. My oldest son is out of school now. My daughter is independent also.
So what have you been hearing from pain folks?
Well, I attended at the end of the last season. I didn't finish why we were doing a special election. We're doing a special election because the election in 2018 was tainted by election fraud, so they called a new one. But about a week before the election, I think in 2018, in October, the Don't Punish Pain North Carolina sponsored a rally, and I can't remember. I think they believe they were at the FDA offices, but I was able to go there, and I met Janelle for the first time, and I met several other people, several of whom I think live in Union County, and some of them are involved in politics. And that was a real eye-opener for me. As you know, as a libertarian, this movement has been joined at the hip with the anti-war on drugs movement ever since the late 60s. So I've always been pro-freedom, pro-individual rights for people who, want to self-medicate. And this problem, I was fascinated to hear you say that this is the first phase of the drug war that has really gone after pain patients. And that was really an eye-opener for me. And I've been trying to follow them on Facebook and several of the other places. I've kept in touch with Janelle, try to figure out where they're meeting, what they're doing. I've listened to some of your shows. I've tried to get myself educated better on what's going on. I'm still having trouble understanding how we get from the CDC, creating this seed of expansive rulemaking, and how this has percolated in such a short time. I mean, March 2016, and here we are, and there's so much abuse that I can sense from the people who I read. It's pretty mind-boggling, and I haven't tuned into it in the sense that I put it as part of my platform, but I just want to say that one of my themes, one of the key themes of my campaign has been anti-war. I'm the peace candidate. And one of the, I was listening to Dr. Jeffrey Singer today talk a little bit about what's going on in what they did in Portugal. They took a very pragmatic position. They just figured they've lost, nothing else has worked. Let's not treat this as a moral problem like a lot of Americans still seem to do. Let's go ahead and try something different. And I think that the same thing that is at work with our expansion around the globe and our willingness to go into other countries, whether it's Vietnam or Iraq, and try to change their regime, try to occupy their countries. I think that same sort of arrogance is at work here domestically. So that's my belief. And
speaking of arrogance, did you know that did you know the DEA has 91 offices outside the United States in guess how many countries? 70.
90.
70.
I guess
some of them are.
Yeah,
some of them are two more than one office.
Right. The American Empire. I was just going to say that's consistent with what we know about the American Empire and the way that it works in many of these countries. I know there's a lot of people in the pain management community that are different political persuasions. So I'm not trying to change the subject about war, but I do think that the DEA is obviously a big part of that.
Did you know that 3% of the population, that's 300,000 people in North Carolina, take pain medicines every day, and that 200,000 of them have been cut off? So there's a voting block out there. There's a voting block out there of 300,000 people, 3%, and add to it at least 1 to 2 other people in their households who support them, and you have potentially near 10% of the voting public. All you got to do is raise your hand and say, you know what? I support the treatment of pain by doctors without interference from the government or the governmental police. We're the only country in the world that has a federal drug police. And that's a lot of people, you know. I mean, everybody I know's got actually more than a couple people who are supporting them. And, you know, if you raise your hand and say, you know, that I'm a legislator to be and I support the treatment of pain and nobody should be messing with a doctor, you're not going to get very many of those people saying, nah, I disagree. You know, it's a political issue that has almost 100%.
I agree with that. Know? I agree. This is a unique opportunity. I don't like to call it an opportunity because it has to do with people suffering. You know, in politics, frequently we are talking about you know, the consequences of long-term debt or the consequences of us being aggressive with another country or the consequences later down the line of things that we might do which might cause problems. But this is not abstract. This is very real. And it really crept up on me.
And I think that people who don't have chronic pain, like Doug that we were talking about, is you go to the emergency room with a broken leg and they're not going to give you pain medicine. What's behind this? You know, you have an operation that split you open.
That's right.
What's happening? That's right. Not even the 10%, Doug. I mean,
yeah. I told my colleague, the Green Party candidate, we were driving to an interview today, and I said, you know, I've been listening to the Doctor's Corner, I've been listening to Dr. Kline, and you know something? It used to be that I was afraid to go into the emergency room, you know, slip on a tile, break something, because I was afraid of, you know, losing so much money and having to being on this treadmill and trying to, you know, just to pay for it. But now I'm actually concerned that if I go in, not only will I lose all my money, but I won't actually get the treatment that I need because I might be in some kind of pain that they cannot treat. So I've got, in my mind, it's like a double whammy. A trip to the emergency room would be terrible. I would have more fear about walking in the door, you know, losing a lot of money, and also not being treated. And it's happened before. I once had a motorcycle accident, and I was in a nice ambulance vehicle, which cost a pretty penny. And I remember the driver looking at me saying, I looked around and said, well, this is a really nice vehicle. And he said, well, wait till you see our bill. And so that was about the time in San Francisco where they were doing, they had a lot of what they call frequent riders, where a lot of homeless people were cracking open a bottle of just a canister of pills. And so they would be required to give them a ride to the nearest hospital or emergency room. So I remember, you know, feeling the pinch of these costs and thinking, you know, next time I'm just going to walk down to the hospital. This is terrible.
Jeff, do you know of any legislators or others, other politicians that are open to these ideas of supporting doctors and patients dealing with pain that you could work with once you are voted in?
No, I think this has crept up. I don't think it's on people's radar, which leads me to a slightly different point about how the movement itself is organized, if it is indeed organized at all. Because just as a candidate for the last couple of years, I've had to think about how I communicate my message. I mean, I'm running against a couple of people who are spending, $25 million, and I can't get, word in edgewise. There's no air in the room for my candidacy because I'm a third party, and it's just very difficult. So the question is, how do you want to communicate your message? Are weekly podcasts going to be enough? Do you need to form, let's say a 501, a C3 or a C4? Do you want to be able to reach politicians directly? Because I know that when there are people who are trying to influence my candidacy and get me to adopt their message, they're sending me questionnaires. Sometimes they're very extensive questionnaires. Sometimes they're just very short. Are you aware of this? What would you do about this and that and the other thing? Just simply to inform them. Now they're gonna answer stuff like that. Of course, the mother's milk of politics is money. So if you raise money to do endorsements, and you can educate them if they're open to being educated about these issues, I'm sure many of them would pick it up. I'm sure many of them are decent, spirited public servants. I do think that the Libertarian Party is unique in this position, in that we've been through these waves of wars on drugs, and we've got literature going back as long as Normal's been around. Certainly in the major think tanks like Cato and Reason, who write about these topics all the time. So I think we've got a lot of credibility on this issue, but to be honest, we're still a third party. I mean, we're the biggest third party in the country, and we have a lot of difficulty getting our voices heard. But this may be exactly the way to open that door for a whole range of policies. I know that it's just very difficult. There are publishing barriers coming up as we speak. If people are trying to get their message out on Facebook is already, preparing for 2020, and they've put out more guidelines. And so we've got to go through another layer of authentication just to be able to speak freely on their platform to push out these messages. So
if you back,
you have to find,
it is. You're very in a very competitive position, and chances of winning are pretty small, as you know, and as you pointed out. You start backing up pain patients, you might see things change. There's a lot more people out there than you realize, and like I said, you're going to get 100% of them. So it's just something to consider. I'm not a politician. I just
no. I
put out facts.
Totally agree with you. Facts are facts. I feel like this program is educational for a lot of people, and it's certainly educational for me. And I've been brought up to speed on what's going on. I've got kind of let's say a low-level chronic pain, which could get worse in the future. And I think that I'm going to think seriously about it, but I don't want to, bore people in the audience about how opportunistically politicians should be thinking about how they maneuver and about how they're raising money, because a lot of people are, quite frankly, sick of it, And when I'm out there talking to voters, and I do love talking to voters. I mean, I was talking to voters all weekend at a festival in Matthews Alive, and there are a lot of people very concerned about, all kinds of issues, the civility. Didn't meet a lot of pain patients, but that there's no reason that I can't bring this up with people, and I can't have literature with me.
If you bring it up, they're going to come out of the wall. See, pain patients don't like to make themselves public because they'll get raided by criminals. So you've got to have a different approach. You can't stop people on the street with your message because they're not on the street. They're home in pain. So, it's a niche issue, and I really think that if somebody embraced it, they would do good. And just before we go, I was going to present this at the beginning with our news stories. New Jersey emergency room is ending the use of opioid painkillers. Yeah. Might as well go back to the caveman, smear some garlic on you. I mean, so that's how bad it's gotten, Scott. This is horrible. This is not smells from pig farms. These are human beings that are dying and whose lives are totally ruined out of interference with a doctor-patient relationship.
Right. And I think it's, I don't think we can put the blame just on the bureaucrats, because I think there's a lot of people out there who believe that, addiction and dependency is some kind of, moral problem. They're concerned about their kids getting high. Yep. They're not willing to talk about the side effects, the historical side effects of this prohibition. And I think of prohibition as just, it's a control over the production and then the distribution through, prescription of doctors.
Yeah.
That is just
that's what's going on. A lot of people do. A lot of people do refer to this as prohibition because that's what they're trying to do. It's an extreme thing. I've been doing this 40 years, and I can tell you this is really extreme. Well, it was very nice talking with you, and hopefully you'll be successful. Hopefully you'll be successful in your election. Think about issues nobody else is talking about and see what happens. Try it out. Get your microphone out and start talking about it. See what kind of response you get, because you won't be talking to people who have chronic rare pain disease, but you'll be talking to people who know them.
That's right.
And they're going to go home and say, "Wow, we got a politician out there that actually supports us." The reason this show Chanel and I do is that it's supportive of people. We're just being old-fashioned supportive, And so politicians can do the same thing. You could just be supportive.
I agree.
Jeff,
thank you so much for that advice.
Is there anything that you wanted to share before we get going here?
No, I just wanted to let people know that we're in the last week before the election, and it is fever pitch here. There's a storm coming in which might affect early voting, just like there was last year. As Dr. Kline mentioned, we had this gerrymandering decision, a decision at the state level, which sort of solidifies, in my opinion, the two-party duopoly and their control over the legislature. So they're going to be redrawing the district. The district I'm running in is going to be redrawn probably within a couple of months. The president and the vice president are coming to help the Republican, and I'm struggling for air. So anything that people would like to do to contribute to getting this message out, the anti-prohibition, the neo-prohibitionism, I'm open to both support and contributions and sharing further interviews. I'm just trying to, make sure that people are aware of my presence on the ballot.
How can people reach out to you or find more information about you?
Well, start on my website, which is Jeff Scott for Congress, just one word. And, if for any reason anything doesn't come up, you can just Google me, Jeff Scott, Libertarian, North Carolina, and it'll come up, Facebook and Twitter and my social media. And you can always call me. My phone number is listed, and I'm welcome to talk. I gave it out I printed it out on my cards, and I was giving it to people. And strangely enough, I've got some very serious calls from people in the middle of the day who wanted to talk for an hour and a half because they really couldn't even get in touch with the other candidates. So I try to make myself as accessible as possible, and I'm open to further discussions on this topic and strategies about how we might work together in the future to make sure that this community is represented and we do not have more tragedies like the tragedy we heard with Doug.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Good night, Jeff.
All right, Dr. Kline. Well, is there anything else that you want to say?
Scott, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Scott. Yeah, that's what happens when you get older, and you eat too many donuts.
That's right.
Start forgetting people's names. All right, Gracie.
All righty. Well, we're going to wrap up here. Just a quick reminder, the rundown for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is Keeping You in the Family with Dr. Margaret Aranda on the topic of sex hormones. And Sunday, DPP Rally Talk Show with Claudia is canceled for this week. A big thank you to our audience and guests and callers, well, not callers, but for taking some time out of your evening to join us here at the Doctor's Corner on CAW 360 Network for your daily dose of truth. I'm Janelle Elgaway with Dr. Kline, signing off till next Tuesday. Have a great evening, Claw Nation.
Good night.
This has been The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.
We are sorry, but the show has ended. Goodbye.